All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to the first episode of Essential Essence, the show where we look at the perks, powers, features, and function of the Essence20 system to help you get the most out of your tutor choices. So, today we are going to be looking at the stalwart anchors of the Power Rangers team. We are going to be looking at the Black Ranger. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this content, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. And a slight aside, as this is our very first episode of Essential Essence, things are going to be a little bit rough as I learn the format and everything and get it kind of refined down. So please bear with me as some weird stuff may happen, and feel free to leave any suggestions for how this series might run a little smoother in the comments down below. We are starting off the Essential Essence by looking at the Essential Essence of the Black Ranger. I decided to start with roles rather than origins or influences just because it's the thing that feels the most comfortable to me and makes the most sense in the format that I've done. So that being said, let's talk about the Black Ranger. So, the Black Ranger, I made a video series talking about how I would quote-unquote fix the Power Rangers RPG because I wasn't particularly fond of them tying your class choice, or in this case roles, to the color spectrum. And I came up with alternate names for each of the roles in case you don't want them to be tied to the color spectrum. And for the Black Ranger, I called them the Anchor. And that really does kind of describe the role that the Black Ranger plays in most of the Giga game. And just for ease of use, I am going to just referring to them as the Black Ranger because that's what it says in the book that I'm reading as I'm going over this. But remember, my personal preference for name of it is the Anchor. So that being said, the Black Ranger is kind of a combination of two different things. One, they are a strength-based character. They're designed to be kind of very strong and a bit hardy, but they also have a feature that we'll talk about in just a second that allows them to use this limited resource called quips and speeches to kind of bolster their allies in various ways. So they kind of bridge the gap between kind of a more tank role and a support role. And depending on how you build them with general perks and grid powers, you can create some pretty varied Rangers that can fill a pretty decent number of roles. But the things that you want to focus on specifically for the Black Ranger, the things that aren't really going to change no matter what the perks or powers that you pick are. The first thing we need to talk about is personal power capacity. Personal power is a limited resource that all Rangers have. And for the most part, some Rangers will have features in the role itself that allow you to burn personal power to do something. But the majority of times when you're going to get the ability to use your personal power, it's going to come from either a grid power that you can start getting at level 6, or either from your influencer or origin. So different Rangers have different personal power capacity growth. It's basically a daily resource. The Black Ranger starts with just 2 personal power, which I believe is everybody starts with 2 personal power. And then he technically has what's referred to as slow personal capacity growth. So he doesn't get they don't get a whole lot of additional personal power points until much further along in their Power Ranger career, and they max out at about 10. So when you're building your character, relying too much on personal power type abilities is going to be a little bit rough for them compared to other rangers that get more personal power points more quickly. Now, there's always the ability to burn story points to regain some personal power. So depending on how your table plays, you know, if you guys are constantly getting story points because like you're like me and you roll like dung, you might be able to be a little bit more liberal with using your personal power capacity, but it is a daily resource, so always remember that. The other thing that is going to be kind of indicative of the roll itself is each roll is going to be tied to your essence score increases. For the Black Ranger, the essence score increase that gets the most increases for it is social. The Black Ranger is designed to be a more social-based character. A lot of their abilities can kind of link into either directly using social-based roles or simply things that would work well in social situations in general. And then the second most increased thing that they get is strength. So they are designed to have some oomph to them. They are designed to be relatively powerful. And because of that, every time you get an essence score increase, you can invest it in one of your skills in that essence score. Because strength is their secondary essence score, there's a couple different ways that you can build a Black Ranger. Because, and I'm going to go here before I say the wrong thing. Because conditioning is one of these strength-based skills, and conditioning is effectively your health. That means if you want to build your Black Ranger to be that very kind of tanky style rubber ranger, you can by every time you get your strength increase, putting it into your conditioning skill and just getting more and more hit points, which would make you very, very difficult to down. On the other hand, there's other things like brawn and might. Right, are those the two things? Where might specifically is used for a lot of your attacks. So if you want to be a more kind of aggressive Black Ranger, something I didn't realize until I was starting to do my research for this particular role, a lot of Black Rangers use an axe of some sort. Even the Black Space Ranger technically uses a monk's spade, which is technically a pole weapon, but it does have a blade on it. So a lot of Black Rangers are kind of built to be very, very strong, powerful characters. So yeah, those are the basics of the Black Ranger role. So let's jump into some actual features. So, moving on. So, at level 1, you get two different things. The first thing that every single Ranger gets is called It's Morphing Time! And that's literally, it allows you to morph into your powered self. Morphing in general is going to be essential for a lot of the things that you do in Power Rangers. It's kind of the gimmick of Power Rangers in general. And quite a few of the abilities of all the roles are going to have the limitation of, well, you do need to be morphed for this. It's not every single one, but quite a few of them will have that little caveat. The specifics of what morphing does. Increases your toughness bonus, which is your strength-based defense, because strength is the secondary characteristic of the Black Ranger. You're probably going to be using your toughness defense a little bit more than your evasion defense. in the Essence20 system. The defender in general can choose which defense they want to do with a few caveats, if I remember correctly. Feel free to correct me in the comments down below, because it's been over a year since I've played it. So having a high toughness bonus is really useful. The Black Ranger themselves is qualified for up to medium armor, which in the Power Rangers isn't quite the same as it is in a lot of the other systems. For the most part, it just means when you morph, your armor is a little bit different. If you can only use light armor, it's +1. If you can use medium armor, it's +2. Heavy is +4. Ultra heavy is +6. So by having medium, they don't have the largest increase to toughness ever, but the fact that strength is their secondary score, and every time they get an increase to their strength score, it's going to increase their toughness, means they're going to be kind of a little bit more difficult to hit than a few of the other Rangers. It also increases your jump distance, because of course Power Rangers can like jump up buildings and stuff like that. They were always doing that. You can use a free action to summon a power-based weapon to your hand. We'll talk about that in a second. And then when reduced to 0 hit points, you can choose to avoid defeat by automatically returning to your natural form, unconscious, and at 1 health. So that's the basics of its morphing time. I probably won't go through its morphing time every single time we do this, but because this is the first Ranger, I figured we'd go through it. The second thing that you get at level 1 is called Heart of the Team. And this is where we're going to start talking about what I'm going to refer to as table features. In the Essence20 Power Rangers RPG, each role has a table that shows you the various things that they happen. They'll have the level, then they'll have the different role perks that you get at every level. They'll sometimes have modifications to those role perks, like we'll talk about Heart of the Team in just a second. And then they will have your personal power capacity, and then they generally will have a column on the table that refers to something that is unique to that particular role. It is so unique, in fact, that in later books they actually include a general perk that effectively allows you to take a feature from another class or another role. But one of the limitations on that perk, it's effectively how you multi-class in the Power Rangers RPG. But one of the limitations to that perk is the fact that you cannot take a perk or a feature that shows up, that gives you an ability that shows up on their table. So going forward, I'm going to refer to these particular things as table features or table perks. And they are effectively, if we go back to my D&D Deep Dive series, they are effectively the equivalent of defining features. These are the unique aspects that make that role different than any other role, and the rest of the class design is going to be built around this particular feature or perk. Some of them will give you an additional limited resource. Some of them will simply give you an increasingly better advantage in certain situations. For the Black Ranger specifically, their table perk is called Quips and Speeches. Basically, what Quips and Speeches is they have a limited number of quips and speeches that they can use per day. And various I'm going to try this one more time. Various role perks that they get will require you to burn one of those quips and speeches. So we're talking about Heart of the Team. As a free action, you can apply an upshift to the role of any ally within a certain distance of you that can understand what you're saying. This costs one of your quips and speeches per long rest, as noted on the table above. And then the value of the upshift is you get to add multiple upshifts as your character gets higher levels. Now, you may notice that I'm not telling you specific things about this. That's one of the only limitations of this series, is there are going to be specifics that I leave out that aren't really necessary to understand how to use the skill, but it does kind of make it more difficult for people to basically use this video as a way that they don't have to actually go out and purchase the books. So every so often I will just say something like, yeah, as a free action, you can apply an upshift to a roll of any ally within a certain distance. If you want to know the actual distance, go pick up the book. There's lots of different ways to get it. And the people over at Renegade that make the Essence20 system have been nothing but nice to me. So that being said, this is the first thing that's really going to define how you want to play this character, because heart of the team, the specific words that are important here is, first of all, it's as a free action. We'll talk about why that's important in a second here. And the second thing is to the roll of an ally within a certain distance of you that can understand what you're saying. So because it's just the roll of an ally, it doesn't specifically list, non-combat or a specific kind of roll like a social roll or an attack roll or something. They don't technically have attack rolls in. They're all skill-based. But because it is just any kind of roll, how you choose to use your heart of the team quips and speeches is really going to define how your character fits into the team. If you are focusing it more on when they make attack rolls, you ensure that they hit, then you're going to be kind of that more support of, we're going to be able to do this. In other instances, you might be using it a lot more often for skill checks outside of combat to make sure that you're getting the things that they want, whether it's a social check to persuade someone, whether it's helping rangers like in one of the adventures that I ran. They had to get over a fence. Well, some rangers that are really, really good at, that have really good either, what are they, might, brawn, or the speed-based one that I can't think of what it's called right now. Acrobatics, there we go. So like athletics or acrobatics, if someone already is trained pretty well in those, they're probably not going to have too much difficulty getting over that fence. Those are the two most common skills that you would use to get over a fence. However, if you have like a blue ranger that went super high into their smarts skill and they just didn't really invest in either strength or speed very much, and the little bit that they did invest in speed went into initiative, then you're going to be able to go, hey, well, I can help the characters that don't have the skills that they need to get the upshifts that they need to be able to get through certain things. So because your quips and speeches are per long rest, so they're daily refilled, it means that you do need to choose where it's going to be the most effective for you. Sometimes someone not being able to get over the fence might be something that stops the whole game. You guys can't keep going until everybody gets over the fence. Or it might be just a minor inconvenience where they go, okay, well, maybe we'll just try again later, or maybe we'll have you stay outside to work as a lookout or something like that. In other situations, I've seen this happen in one of the games that I ran. They were just having a really, really hard time hitting this particular creature. So saving up your quips and speeches specifically to help your allies take out the bad guy when it needs to go can be very useful. And that's going to be one of the biggest choices you have playing a Black Ranger, is choosing where are my quips and speeches going to be the most effective, especially when you start getting more ways that you can use those. Right now, Heart of the Team is the only thing you have, and it's a really powerful ability. The ability to just upshift anybody doing anything as long as you have a free action is really nice. Now, that's the other thing that we have to mention here is the idea of a free action. And in the Essence20 system, there are, in the Essence20 system, there are effectively 3 different types of actions you can take. You have a move action, which does literally what it says. You have your standard action, which is what you do for the vast majority of the stuff that you want to do. That's your standard action. And then you have what's called a free action. Free actions are not free. That is my biggest gripe with the Essence20 system, is they use the term free action when it's not a free action. Free actions are based on your speed score. In combat, or basically anytime you're in initiative, the number of actions that you have is going to be based on your speed score. If you have a speed score of 1, you only have a move or a standard action that you can perform. So on your turn, you can either move or you can perform an action, not both. If you have 2 speed points, or 2 points in speed, you can do a move and a standard action. And if you have 3 points in speed, then you can do a move, a standard action, and 1 free action. And for every point above 3 you have in your speed essence, you get an additional free action per turn. Now, free actions can be used for a lot of different things. You can use them to basically buy additional movement if you need to get somewhere. And again, if you're being a strength-based character, most strength-based weapons, aside from a few throwing weapons, are melee. So movement is useful for you. If you are aiming, if you're using a ranged weapon, you can use a free action to aim, which will help you to hit your target better. And then most roles are also going to have ways to burn for free actions as well. Having more free actions are going to give you the ability to have more choices in combat, or really anytime you're using Heart of the Team, because it is going to require a free action. Now, something that's not defined here, and I don't know if it's actually defined in the combat chapter either, but I'm going to look just to be on the safe. Just to be on the safe side before I say the wrong thing. So you can use a free action to get your power weapon, which is very, very useful. Other things that you can use for free actions. Is that I'm not finding it here. But anyway, so aiming is one of the things, buying additional movement is one of the things, getting your power weapon is one of the things, and then for now, it's going to also be your quips and speeches, specifically your Heart of the Team. So because they don't specifically say it in here, generally in most tabletop RPGs, your turn is your turn, and then doing things not on your turn generally requires something like, in D&D 5th edition, you have a single reaction that you can do. As far as I can tell, I don't see a reaction in the Essence20. Again, feel free to correct me in the comments down below. It's been a little bit of time since I've gone really, really in depth. But based on this and the fact that you cannot use Heart of the Team on your turn because it requires you to give an upshift to the roll of any ally, and allies would be making their rolls on their turn, I would say that the number of free actions you get are effectively reset whenever your turn comes around. So if you don't have enough free actions available to you, you might not be able to use Heart of the Team when you want. So bare minimum, you're going to want to start your Black Ranger with at least 3 points in speed, so you have at least one free action. I generally recommend most people, if you're playing the Essence20 system, specifically Power Rangers, have at least 3 points simply because, again, summoning your power weapon is a free action. The things like that are very, very, very useful. But for the Black Ranger, it might be more useful to have to start off with a 4 in speed, despite the fact that you're already going to be investing pretty heavily in your social and you're going to be investing pretty heavily in your strength. It wouldn't be a bad idea to put a little bit more in your speed essence just to make sure that you always have a chance to use Heart of the Team when you need to. So, yeah, that's level 1. Moving on. At second level, you get another 2 abilities. The first is Whatever We Need. Effectively, whatever we need is you can, by expending one of your quips and speeches per long rest and asking the non-player character in question for a favor, you can gain an edge on all alertness, deception, and persuasion skill checks targeting them for 5 minutes. Effectively, whatever we need is a charm skill. If you were playing in a magic based setting, whatever we need would very much be kind of like a charm spell or something like that. The nice thing about whatever we need compared to something like the Friends cantrip in D&D, which has similar effects, is the Friends cantrip and most charm effects, at the end of the effect, people know that they've been charmed and it can cause issues. This is simply you charm them and you get an edge, which is the effectively advantage. It's the same basic principle. You roll your d20 twice and take the higher of the 2 rolls. On all alertness, so watching and seeing what's going on with them. Deception, if you're trying to lie to them. And persuasion, if you're trying to convince them of something. Specifically, it says you can gain edge. So this is not something that your entire team does, but it does mean that this character can play the face of the party pretty well. Not just like well, they can be really, really effective at getting the things that you need. And because it lasts for 5 minutes, one of the things I've always enjoyed about Power Rangers in general is combat in Power Rangers TV shows is not just they're constantly talking with each other and trying to gain an edge and things like that. And so while yes, this sounds like a non-combat ability, it could be just as useful in combat to be able to manipulate your enemies. Like monsters in Power Rangers in general all tend to have kind of flaws and things like that a lot of times in the Power Rangers TV show they would use to their benefit. Like Pudgy Pig was one of the monsters in the original Power Rangers Season 1. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. And the way that they were able to beat him was Pudgy Pig would eat absolutely everything, but for whatever reason, he didn't like spicy food. And so they call it a hot pepper in Power Rangers, but they use footage from Super Sentai where hot peppers really aren't a huge thing in Japan. They use radishes are considered really, really spicy, which they are. If you've never had an actual raw radish, they have a bite to them. And like wasabi as well is kind of a radish and things like that. So what they do is they basically take like a large like hoagie roll, put this weird looking radish in it, and they throw it to Pudgy Pig. If we translate that into the Power Rangers RPG, it could be just as simple as the GM going, well, it's Pudgy Pig. They will eat anything that's put in front of them. But we've already seen earlier in the episode that they actively avoid spicy foods. So they're aware of that. So in combat, you could have your Black Ranger use whatever we need to get an edge on a deception check and use that to convince him that, well, no, this isn't a spicy radish. This is a super flavorful thing, and it's the best tasting thing in the world. And grr, if only I didn't have my helmet on, I would be eating this right now. And in combat, like, there's so many different things with a tabletop RPG that you can do in combat to try and change how things are going, especially if you're dealing with something that was really common in most Power Ranger series, is you would have your monster of the week, which you are expecting to get rid of, and then you would generally also have some kind of recurring bad guy that would show up. On Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, it was Goldar, and then eventually Scorpina as well. Rito eventually became something like that. And certain series didn't have that kind of recurring thing. Certain things did. But it's not an uncommon thing. So by using whatever we need in combat with one of those recurring characters, it's very possible that you can get them to retreat a little bit early, maybe even using whatever we need as a benefit to tanking, where you use your persuasion skill to convince them to attack you instead of someone else, or you could use your deception skill to convince them that you are the most important member of the team and therefore they should try attacking you instead of attacking any of the other players, in an attempt to, again, use your higher toughness score in order to protect yourself, and the fact that you may have a lot more hit points than the rest of your party. So all of those things can be extremely useful in whatever we need. Whereas I think most people, when they read this over, it's just like, oh, he's the bard and he can talk to people real good. But there's a lot of instances in combat where that's going to be just as useful. And it doesn't specifically require, it doesn't mention anything, a free action or anything. So this is just something you can do. No action required. It'll just give you that. And because combat, a single round of combat takes 6 seconds, 5 minutes is 50 rounds of combat. You're never going to be in combat that long. So whatever we need is going to last for the entirety of combat and a little bit after it. So very, very useful. The second thing you get at second level is called You Got This. And this is another thing where, as a free action, you can spend one of your quips and speeches per day to give an ally within a certain distance a number of temporary health that lasts until the end of the current combat scene. And the amount of health is increased at various levels. So this was another one that got me a little bit confused when I was reading it, because a number of temporary health is not me obscuring something to prevent people from using this basically as a way of piracy. No, that's how they list it in here. And the only way you can figure out how much health you can give is you go back to the table, and at second level it lists whatever we need, and then You Got This, and it has a 1 in parentheses after that. So when you first get this ability at level 2, you can give 1 temporary hit point, which, if you're used to other tabletop RPGs, that may sound kind of pointless. 1 hit point is basically 1 hit. Like a lot of hits that you take, especially at level 2, are only going to do 1 point of damage. You don't have a massive, you don't have 50, 100 hit points. You generally will start with like 2 or 3 hit points. So the ability to be able to give out temporary hit points is really useful. It does specifically say lasts until the end of the current combat scene, so that is a combat-focused ability. But again, the ability to just give out health, and again, it's done as a free action. So this is another thing that is going to require that you have enough free actions to be able to use it. And there's a lot of different situations where being able to just hand out an additional health to players, even if it doesn't last very long. This can be the difference between someone being taken out of combat and someone being able to use their to turn. And there's nothing in this particular write-up that says that there's a limitation as to how many times you can do it to a certain character. So if you have one person that just seems to keep getting hit over and over again, and they're getting really low on health, you can just you got this them to keep them in combat, and then do something to try and convince the person to stop attacking them. But as long as they have that point of temporary hit points, they're going to be able to survive that little bit longer. Which again, very very useful thing. So yeah, and this is also now you have at level 2 you have 3 different ways that you can spend your quips and speeches, but you still only have 2 of them per day. So you have your heart of the team, where you're going to be bolstering your team and helping them. You have whatever we need, which is basically going to be bolstering yourself to be able to manipulate other Kika characters. And then you have you got this, which is basically going to be keeping your team alive and in the fight longer. So all 3 of those things are very, very useful. 2 of them require free actions. And they all are using your limited resource of quips and speeches. So that's the big thing, that even as you level up this character and start getting other unique things, those are the things that you're going to be balancing the most. Is, do I want to keep my party alive? Do I want to be able to manipulate creatures more effectively, or do I want my allies to be doing better at whatever it is that they're doing? All of those are really, really useful. Another thing that we always want to mention when we're talking about upshifts, if you are using Heart of the Team on someone that is using specifically a specialization, the way that critical hits work in the Essence20 system is if you roll the maximum you can roll on one of your skill dice, aside from a D2, you get a crit on it. If you are specialized, you get to roll every one of your skill dice and take whichever one is highest. And the unique thing about specialization is you still get your crit even if you're not using the die that crit. So let's say I have a D8 in my persuasion skill, and I'm specialized specifically in I don't know what a specialization for persuasion would be. Social-based skills. I'm actually going to look here because I can't think of any specializations for persuasion. Persuasion, diplomacy, embellishments, flattery. Let's say flattery. Yeah, you have a specialization in flattery. You're trying to flatter a character into giving what you want. And so I roll my D20, but then I get a 4 on my D4, a 5 on my D6, and a 3 on my D8. Well, I'm going to take the 5 because that's the highest I rolled. But because I rolled a max on my D4, that still means I get to treat it as a critical. I get to treat it as a critical success. So when you're using Heart of the Team, understanding when players are using a specialization is really essential, because upshifting just gives them another chance to be able to roll max. And so every time you're using Heart of the Team, try and think, or you can also spend a story point to just let them roll as if they were specialized, which would work the exact same way. So understand, specialization and Heart of the Team synergize really, really well. Moving on. The next few levels we are just going to kind of combine together because they don't give anything really unique to this character. They're things that all Power Rangers get at these levels. At 3rd level, you get your Zord. Designing your Zord, I will probably need to do an entire series for Essential Essence, talking about Zords and the various ways that you can get them to work the way that you want them to. But 3rd level is when all Rangers get their Zords, so that's that. And then as you level up, you will be able to get additional Zord perks. So the original Zord that you get at third level is going to be modified and customized as you go, which is kind of how the Power Rangers RPG works in general. Like, as much as Heart of the Team, Whatever We Need, and You Got This are the kind of core defining features of the Black Ranger role, when you start putting in general perks and grid powers, you can really kind of specialize and make the character fill a bunch of different a bunch of different positions in the team, and really kind of customize them. But you do want to always be focusing on, okay, well, these are my, this is my table perk, and these are the other things that influence that table perk. So when you're picking your general perks and your grid powers and things like that, look for things that are going to help in that particular realm. So it's third level. Fourth level, you get to pick your first general perk, and it works literally identically to feats in D&D 5th edition. You get first one at 4, and then it's every 4 levels effectively. So 8th, 12th, 16th, and then 19th. It's the same basic thing. I've never really felt the need to kind of obscure how that works, because it's how everything works that is influenced by 5th edition. At 5th level, you get extra attack, which just means you can attack twice instead of one when you take the attack action on your turn. And this is one of the first ones where they specifically say this role perk only functions while morphed and fighting as an individual. So you don't get extra attack when you are in your Megazord form. And you don't get extra attack when you are unmorphed. There are situations where you as Power Rangers are going to be in combat without being morphed. So understanding that your extra attack is only going to happen when you're morphed also kind of gives you an incentive to morph when things are getting really, really bad. And then finally, at 6th level, you get your first grid power. And total for, I believe for all Power Rangers, but I know specifically for the Black Ranger, you only get a total of 3 grid powers throughout your Power Rangers career. The first one comes at 6th level, and then the other 2 come at little later levels. So understand, when you're choosing your grid powers, treat them like you would a feat in D&D 5th edition, where you only get a limited number of them. So make sure that when you're choosing your grid powers, you're choosing ones that are going to give you the most benefit. And as far as new perks granted by the role, that's all you get until 11th level. And again, from 3rd level all the way through CISA 6, it's not really anything unique to the Black Ranger role. Just about everybody gets the same role perks here. They all get general perks. They all get grid powers. I believe most get extra attack. I can't be 100% certain that every single Ranger gets extra attack. So yes, you do get other things like You Got This gets upgraded. Your Heart of the Team gets upgraded in that time as well. But they're just upgrades. They're not new features or perks or anything like that, so I don't really feel the need to focus on them. So, moving on. At 11th level, you get One for All. Once per day, as a standard action, while morphed, you can spend 3 of your current personal power to allow all your teammates to regain a number of personal power immediately. Unlike other Black Ranger features, this does not cost one of your quips and speeches. So, One for All is a really, really interesting thing, because regaining personal power only happens 2 ways in the Power Rangers role-playing game. 1, you get a long rest, and then all your personal power comes back. Or 2, you spend as many story points as there are players, and everybody gets to regain 1d2 personal power for doing that. But again, if you have a 5-person team, which is really common for a Power Rangers team, that means you have to burn 5 story points for that to happen. And it also means that everybody needs to be using their personal power points. Up until this point, nothing in the role has used personal power. So the only way you're going to be spending personal power is if something in your origin or influence gave you the ability to spend personal power, or, and I'm not 100% certain that happens, I just trying to think of a way that you could spend personal power before getting a grid power at 6th level, and that's the only way I could think it would work. Or you're using one of your grid powers, because quite a few grid powers allow you to burn personal power to do cool things. So once for all, or one for all, is going to be the first time that you have the ability to spend your personal power, which is kind of weird being an 11th level ability. But again, grid powers can get that, and I'm certain there's other ways to do it. I just, off the top of my head, I can't remember them. But this, again, is another one of those things that can be game saving. Because depending on how the rest of the Rangers have built their characters, being able to get an extra personal power in the middle of something going on can be very, very useful. It doesn't require any story points or anything like that. It's just something that you can do. And this is another thing where support characters like this benefit the most from understanding the rest of your team. You're really not going to be able to play the Black Ranger role well if you are not paying attention to what the rest of your team is doing. There are other Rangers, like the Green Ranger, can act a little bit more selfishly and still work really, really well. But the Black Ranger really requires you to understand what the rest of your team is doing and do things that are going to benefit the rest of your team. And One for All is a perfect example of that. If you're not paying attention and you decide to use One for All when people already have plenty of personal power, well, you're dropping 3 of your own personal power, which is a big chunk, and it's not really giving your team that much of a benefit. On the other side, if you're not paying attention, you might notice that maybe your Blue Ranger, which has really fast personal power growth, and use it a little bit more, you might notice that they're not able to do a lot of the things that they're normally doing because they've just run out of personal power points. And so at that point, you'd be like, hey, maybe we should do One for All because it'll help them and it'll help everyone else as well. So yeah, the biggest thing that you need to know for One for All is if you want to take advantage of it often, again, it is a one and done ability. It's a once per day ability. If you want to take advantage of it every single day effectively, the rest of the team has to be aware, first of all, that you have this ability, and second of all, that you're going to be using it when the team needs it. One for All relies on the rest of your team using their personal power and using it effectively. So another one of those things that hyper encourages you to be very aware of what the rest of your team is doing. So moving on. We don't get another new ability until level 18. But at level 18, we get All for One. If you're ever brought to 0 personal power or 0 health, you can immediately call on your fellow Ranger teammates to help you. When this role perk is called up, each member of your team may choose to give a number of power or 1 health to you immediately, spending the same amount from themselves to do so. This ability may only be used once daily. So there's a couple things that kind of limit how useful this ability can be. When this role perk is called upon, each member of your team may choose. So those are 2 really important things. It's not one member of your team, it's each member of your team. And then the second one is may. In tabletop RPGs, the word may or can is really, really important because that implies a choice. If they worded it, each member of your team chooses to give you blah blah, that would imply that everybody has to be involved with it, and if they can't, then it doesn't work. This one is each member of your team may choose. So if one team member only has one health point or doesn't have any personal power point, it doesn't mean that the ability is not going to work. They can choose not to do it. And again, all for one is another thing that's going to lend itself into that more tank kind of role, because specifically because it's the 0 health thing. If you are using whatever we need to get the enemy to focus on you a lot, and you are just getting blown away by the attacks, and you got this is only for allies, it's not for you in particular, so you're taking a lot of hits but the rest of the team isn't, it basically is a way for them to kind of pool their hit points into you. And it's also going to prevent you from going down in combat, which can be really disastrous for combat in general, because in the Essence20 system there aren't revives or anything like that. If you are taken out of combat, you're done. You don't get to come back until after the combat scene is resolved. You're not dead or anything like that unless that's what you decide happens. But it does massively shift how the game is going to work for the rest of that combat. So all for one basically means you have a secondary source of hit points. The other thing that's cool about this, if you do decide to rely a lot more on your grid power for this particular character, you can use all for one to get personal power back and use that for anything from battleizers. A lot of times use grid power. All the other grid powers that you can get can give you a lot of different things you can do. So again, all for one gives you so many different choices on how you want to build this character, and it really does allow you to kind of specialize this particular ability in the way that you've already built this character. So unlike a lot of like D&D 5th edition subclasses where it's going to kind of pigeonhole you into a particular role, your class itself is going to a lot of times kind of pigeonhole you into a particular role. This one really isn't. Even when you're getting to your high level abilities where you would think they would be a little more specialized, it's allowing you to have a really wide variety of builds that will still interact really, really well with all for one. So yeah, make sure that, and again, another thing that's really important for all for one is understanding how the rest of your team is doing. If you are burning through personal power points, assuming that the rest of your team is going to be able to give you more so that you can continue doing the things that you want, and the rest of your team is tapped out, you're going to be in trouble. Or if you are just completely ignoring what's your own safety to try and protect your team, thinking that once you hit 0 hit points, you're going to be able to get this infusion of health for them, and the rest of the team is already at like 2 or 1 hit points apiece, well, they're not going to be able to give you points unless they're willing to be knocked out of combat. Which again might be a choice that they make if the Blue Ranger realizes that they're tapped out of all their resources, and they realize that you are just going to be more effective. That might be the sacrifice that they make. Or it may not, but again, all for one, you really need to understand what's going on with the rest of your team. So yeah, moving on. Finally, at 20th level, you get Black Ranger Prime. The Prime abilities are something that happens for every single Power Ranger at 20th level. And they basically just give you buffs to certain things. For Black Ranger Prime specifically, you get a +2 to all your defenses, you get an additional point of damage on martial art attacks, and you get an edge on all social skill checks. Now, that does mean that Black Ranger Prime actually interacts with whatever we need, because both Deception and Persuasion are social skill checks. So now, whatever we need, once you hit 20th level, if you hit 20th level, whatever we need, the only benefit it gives you, because you can't have double edge, The only benefit that you get from whatever we need is an edge on alertness tests against that particular target, which alertness is a smart base skill, and it can be used for like one of the specializations you can get for alertness is insight, so kind of judging if people are lying. But it can also be like perception or investigation, where just doing things. So perception and investigation a lot of times are not going to be useful against a specific target, but insight and kind of awareness like that is going to be the really beneficial thing. So what that effectively does, once you get Black Ranger Prime, is whatever we need kind of becomes significantly less valuable, but it means that you are clearing up your use of quips and speeches to be able to more heavily rely on heart of the team, or you got this. So while it does kind of make your second level ability significantly less useful, because now the only benefit it gives you is on alertness, being able to tell when people are lying is really, really useful. So there still are uses for it, but your quips and skills, or quips and speeches, are already a limited resource, and being able to free up that limited resource to do the other two really useful things that are built into your character, heart of the team, and you got this, are definitely going to be beneficial for you. So moving on. Finally, we get to final thoughts. So again, overall, the Black Ranger role really excels at two basic places. They can make really phenomenal tank-like characters, using their higher strength scores to give them higher toughness defense, their medium armor training to give them a higher toughness to defense, and using it to add to the conditioning ability, which just gives them more hit points and the ability to just take more damage. And then also has the ability to be a really great support style character, using heart of the team to ensure that not only are your team succeeding on the skills that they're doing, but by combining that with specializations and things like that, basically kind of milking roles for critical successes to get really useful things. And then using You Got This to keep the rest of your team engaged, while also using whatever you need to get the things that you want. You can have a really, really interesting character. Again, depending on the perks that you pick and the grid powers that you pick, you can create a kind of very wide variety of specializations for this particular role, and it can fit into quite a few different places. Lore-wise, either the Black or the Blue Ranger generally tends to be the second in command of most Power Rangers teams. In Mighty Morphin, the Black Ranger was the second in command. Zach was considered the second in command of the Power Rangers. So the ability to be really solid on social skills and the ability to kind of motivate the rest of your team really lends well to that idea of being the second in command, the guy that the leader relies on. All of those things are very, very useful for this role. And I think it could turn into a really interesting, fun character to play. However, that is going to be all for me today. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, what is your favorite Black Ranger that has been in any of the Power Rangers series? Or if Power Rangers is something that's a little bit newer to you, how would you like to play the anchor role, which is again what I call them? or the Black Ranger role? Do you like the idea of building them more towards that kind of tank, I can take a lot of damage, I can protect my friends? Or do you like them more as the kind of support, almost bard-like character where I'm throwing out heart of the team to get them to do what they want, and I'm throwing out you got this to keep them in the fight longer? Which of those two styles do you prefer? Or do you like the idea of a hybridization of both of them? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.